Welcome to PBCJ's A Different Life, your window into the world of persons with disabilities. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Hendricks. In this episode, we will introduce you to the community of persons with disabilities in Jamaica and bring into sharp focus some of the issues that may be of interest to them and you. In just a moment, we will be speaking with our first guest, lecturer and director of the Center for Disability Studies at the University of the West Indies, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to A Different Life, your window into the world of persons with disabilities. I'm Dr. Christine Hendricks, and today we'll be opening that window by introducing those who might not be aware to the various classifications of disabilities that exist. With me in studio is Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, lecturer and director of the Center for Disability Studies at the University of the West Indies. Welcome, Senator, and thank you for joining us.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here with you today.
Awesome. Okay, so let's begin. When we say the word disability, what exactly do we mean?
The whole issue of disability will take on different meaning dependent on where you're from, dependent on the jurisdiction that you're in. But for this discussion, I want to simplify it for the audience to indicate that a disability is a situation where an individual has an impairment, and when that impairment interacts with various barriers in society, serve to restrict and hinder the full participation of the individual in society on an equal basis with others. In fact, the impairment is interacting with barriers that have been established in the society, and that causes and contributes to a disability.
Thank you so much, Senator. You know, we could really go down that road in terms of the disability interacting with the barriers in society that causes, or the impairment interacting with the barriers in society that causes the disability. But we will move on to the main groups of persons with disabilities. Who are these main groups? Could you help us to understand how are they classified?
Well, globally there are 8 major categories of disabilities. You're talking about individuals who are blind or visually impaired, deaf or hard of hearing, those who have mental illness, those who are intellectually disabled, those who have speech disorders, learning disabilities, and you have those with neurological disorders. So those are the 8 major categories of disabilities that you have.
Okay, so of all of these, which are the most common, would you say, in Jamaica?
Well, it is struggling between those who have a physical disability and those with learning disability, because learning disability covers a wide gamut of individuals who have dyscalculia, they have problems with mathematics. You have those individuals who are categorized as dyslexic, those individuals who have problems with reading, those individuals dysgraphia, problems with writing. So it is struggling between those with learning disabilities, which is a sort of hidden disability because you are not able to recognize the disability by looking at the person. And that is why it's called hidden disability, categorized as hidden disability. And then the physical disability, which individuals have some form of amputated limb or impairment in terms of the body structure. And in a society where we have significant levels of violence and accidents on the road, you have a lot of individuals, again, developing various types of physical disabilities. So I would say it's between learning disabilities and those with physical disabilities.
Okay, thank you so much for telling us that. But according to any survey that has been done recently, any ideas of the percentage of Jamaica's overall population that may have a disability?
Well, that is a difficult issue because, I've been looking at the data from the National Census since 1991 and tracking where we are with the data. And I mean, there are some concerns about the 2011 census data, which is showing about 70,000 persons with disabilities. And this is compared to what transpired in the 2001 and 1991 census, which showed in 91 just over 111,000 individuals with a disability, and in 2001, 162,000 individuals with a disability, which would be just below 10% of the population. So what I use as a guide based on the different types of disabilities is the World Health Organization's 2011 report, which points to between 15 and 17% of countries across the world having their population having a disability. So I generally use the World Health Organization data as a guide.
And that would put us into about between 400,000 and 500,000 persons having a disability. Very interesting. I think there is so much more to say than many persons realize. But we have to take a short break right now. But I'm going to ask you to stay with us, Senator Morris, so we can continue this conversation. Back in a moment. Welcome back to A Different Life. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Hendricks, and we're chatting with Senator Dr. Floyd Morris in an effort to increase our awareness as it pertains to Jamaica's community of persons with disabilities. Thanks again for joining us, Senator.
Always my pleasure.
So now earlier you outlined for us the main groups by which persons with disabilities are classified. I would like us now to speak about some of the challenges that these individuals might be facing on a day-to-day basis.
Persons with disabilities, dependent on the type of disability, face different challenges. So I will speak in
So tell me about the physical, first of all. Well, persons with physical disabilities. What are the challenges that they would face?
Definitely, persons with physical disabilities, the major concern for them is access to public facilities, access to buildings, access to public transportation, because these individuals have a physical impairment that if the facilities are not built with the requisite access features, for example, ramps, so that those who are using wheelchair can move around quite easily, or have grab rails so that it can help individuals along the way. So the major concern for those individuals would be the physical environment and how accessible that environment is to them. Then you have individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Those individuals have a serious communication challenge, so they want to make sure that they are able to interact and communicate with individuals in their language, and their standard language is sign language. So, they want to make sure that when they are interacting with individuals in the public space, they are able to communicate via sign language or closed caption as an alternate means.
Okay, so we have spoken about persons with physical disabilities and persons who are deaf. And I would maybe say persons who are deaf, they are not the ones with the issue. We in society are the ones who are unable to communicate with them. Isn't that so, Senator?
Absolutely.
So indeed, we would need to learn the Jamaican Sign Language.
Indeed.
But let's run along, since our time is very short here, and look at persons with visual disabilities. What are the challenges that persons with visual impairments and blindness would face?
Their challenges are multiple-fold because, again, they have access challenges as well, to be able to walk and move around on the sidewalk without any form of barriers in their way. The light poles, the manholes that are uncovered, and sometimes they have a difficulty navigating with their white cane. And then they have communication challenges as well, because some blind persons will use Braille, others will rely on speech programs to be able to interact with non-disabled individuals. And so, those issues poses challenges to persons with visual disabilities from time to time. And of course, I'm going to throw this in as a cross-cutting challenge for all the disability group. That is the whole issue of access to employment, which is a major social, societal problem in terms of persons with disabilities being able to get gainful employment.
And perhaps we could add education into the mix.
Most definitely, because our educational infrastructure is not built in such a way that it makes it accessible and accommodative for persons with different types of disabilities.
So can you, having said all of that, as a person with a disability yourself, what are your own personal concerns? I am very much concerned that we still have negative attitudes towards persons with disabilities in the society, and that is shaping how individuals treat and relate to persons with disabilities. I'm very much concerned about our educational infrastructure and how accessible and inclusive it is for persons with disabilities. And then when persons with disabilities do get into the educational space and get an education, how responsive are we to them in terms of generating employment for them? I mean, I've known of individuals with disabilities who have gone through the challenges of getting a university education, but upon graduating, they just can't get a job, and you have them finding menial tasks to do, and any society that is progressive is going to make sure that they cater to all the different groups within their society. And I'm very much concerned that we are not putting in place thus far all the measures to include and allow for persons with disabilities to participate in a fulsome way in the Jamaican society. And so what would be those solutions you think that could help to stem this wide gap between persons with disabilities and the rest of society?
Well, most definitely we'll have to put in place legislative measures to ensure that the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities are protected. And then we have to engage in what I regard as a consistent, sustained public education campaign. I tell people that we have had over 500 years of negative socialization towards persons with disabilities. that sort of socialization is not going to change in a 6-month campaign. It has to be sustained, and we have to see a campaign akin to that which transpired in the early 80s, the Two is Better Than Too Many campaign, which was a family planning engagement. But we have to make sure that we put in place a campaign that says to the Jamaican population that you might be disabled, but you can participate and contribute to the society just as anyone else, because disability respects no one. You may be disabled today, you may be able-bodied today and disabled tomorrow.
Or even the next minute, Senator.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, so important to know. But how important is it that persons impacted by these conditions have support systems in place to assist with their needs? So aside from, society ensuring that there are some things in place, what are some other support systems that need to be in place to ensure that persons with disabilities are supported?
Well, definitely, family and friends, critical to the support network for persons with disabilities, because I tell people that the successes that I have had as a person with disabilities could not have come by my own doing. It had to receive that sort of support from family and friends over the years, and then I capitalized on all of that and made sure that I gave the best that I could be. And then the state has to make sure that there are supportive mechanisms in place to assist persons with disabilities with modern technologies, because we're going to need assistive technologies to be able to interact with society on a consistent and equal basis. We have to make sure that we put in place the measures where persons with disabilities can move around freely and independently in the society as much as possible. So there are a number of support mechanisms that will have to be put in place for the full maximization of the potentials of persons with disabilities.
Okay, awesome. We look forward to that, certainly, Senator. Well, you spoke about legislation earlier and the importance of that, ensuring the rights of persons with disabilities. Where are we with that?
Well, in 2014, the Parliament passed the Disabilities Act. And the Disabilities Act spells out a number of areas that it gives protection for persons with disabilities, covering, some of the areas, education, employment, housing, public transportation, healthcare. And the legislation also gives recognition to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that we signed in 2007, and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities reaffirms certain fundamental rights and freedoms for persons with disabilities. So with those two instruments working together, it will give significant protection to persons with disabilities in Jamaica. It has taken some time for the legislation to be implemented, but I am certain that in 2021 the legislation will be promulgated.
Well said, Senator. Thank you once again for joining us. Up next, we'll be speaking with clinical psychologist and special educator, Dr. Avril Daly, about the prevalence of mental disabilities in Jamaica. We'll be right back. Thank you, Senator.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah. Welcome back to A Different Life. I'm Dr. Christine Hendricks, And joining us now is Dr. Avril Daly, clinical psychologist and special educator. Dr. Daly, welcome. So nice to have you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay, so I just spoke with Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, and he was sharing about disabilities in a wide scope. However, in this segment, we want to be delving a little deeper into the categories of mental disabilities. Can you start us off by giving us a sense of what these categories are and the traits by which they are classified or characterized?
Okay, thank you. Mental disability is a very wide scope, and it encompasses many disorders, but the overarching thing is that it affects the person's ability to function in a daily basis, interpersonal relationships, and also their daily living skills. It can affect the person for a few weeks to a few months, or sometime for a lifetime. Importantly, as you said, there are various kinds of mental disorders. The mood disorders, for example, which is the most widely known and it's the most prevalent of all the mental disabilities. They affect your feeling, as it says, mood, the depression, the bipolar, and then you have anxiety, which is another great. And now during COVID-19, we're seeing a rise in the anxiety and the depressive disorders.
Okay.
Then we have the psychotic disorders that will take in schizophrenia. And this is the category that most Jamaican people will classify as mentally ill because their base in reality might not be what it should be. They might have delusions, they might have hallucinations, they might be seeing things that's not there, hearing things, even feeling things, feel their things crawling on them and things like that. And then you have some of the disorders we see in children as well, because many times people think that children don't have a mental disorder, but it can actually start in childhood and go on. So things like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, specific learning disability, and intellectual disability. Those are some of the main ones that I can think of. And then with the COVID, panic disorder as well.
Okay,
yes.
So it does cover a large area because it covers mental disabilities as we know it, plus our mental illnesses, learning disabilities, and intellectual disabilities.
Right.
Wow. Because it is so difficult to identify sometimes, particularly those who are not severe, what are some steps you think can be taken to increase the awareness of our Jamaicans about these disorders or disabilities?
One thing that I would want for us to do is not to focus so much on the labels, but practicing good mental health. Okay?
Excellent.
Because sometimes if you're waiting for a diagnosis, it might never come.
Right.
And the person might need some kind of support. But you're saying, oh, we can't do anything because there's no diagnosis. So we focus on mental health. And we want the persons to look at mental health the same way you look at physical health. Because most persons, as soon as they're feeling any pain, would want to go to the doctor to figure out what is happening. The same thing. If you're feeling very sad, if you're feeling very down, or on the flip side, if you're feeling super excitable, over the top, which is going into mania, you might want to say, okay, there's something going on. It's not my usual self. I need to go and get someone to talk to. I need to go and talk with somebody. I need to get that kind of support. So that's something that we need to do for our people.
Particularly in this pandemic,
yes,
when so many persons are having anxiety attacks, you know, work and home, you know, that imbalance that is taking place, and persons are not sure where to reach out to for real.
Right.
And so family and friends who are aware, once they know, as you said, understand the signs, they can reach out by providing guidance to where these persons can get help. So can you tell me, aside from the University of the West Indies, where else can persons go for such assistance?
Well, again, it depends on what is happening with the person, because you have support group, like oh boy, Mensana, right? They have Kumi, right? There are different support groups that's out there. Even your organization, JCPD, because one thing too, sometimes you have a dual diagnosis of like an intellectual disability with one of the more severe mental illnesses that you might want to have the person. So they might start with you first and say, my person has intellectual disability, where can I go for help? Because he's also showing signs of hallucination and stuff. And then hospitals, a lot of the clinics, the Ministry of Health website has lots of where the clinics are, what days are actually the mental health days, where there's a psychiatrist there, psychiatric nurse, and will be there that you can say, okay, I can take my person here. Or even not even a mental health day, take them there and they'll be able to direct you as to where. So you need to know where your community mental health services are. So you'll have access to them and the different support group that they have.
And of course, there is the Jamaican Association for Persons with Intellectual Disability
as well,
that can provide that sort of help. Okay. Anything else the family and friends can do to provide that support? So they know what signs to look for, they know where the services are available. Anything else after they take them there, what next? Well,
they need to become an active part in the treatment plan.
Okay.
All right? Because as we say, the person who is having mental illness challenge at that particular time will not be so aware of how to interact with other persons. They might not be taking care of their daily living skills. So the family member will have to be there to say, okay, medication. All right? If they're on any medication, it's very important that the family member supports them. Because a lot of times, if you're being paranoid and think that you're out to hurt me, I'm not going to want to take them with the medication. So their job is to try and assist them in making sure that they're doing that. They also might if the person might use other substance like illicit drugs to try and cope with, they should be aware of that to try and help them not to use that, because sometimes the illicit drug counteracts what's happening with the legal psychopharmacology that they actually get, and it creates more problem for them. So they have to be able to do that for them as well. All right, keep them on top with their times for check-ins with the doctors. Remember the date for clinic. Make sure they are registered maybe with even NHF to get the medication, because one of the things is the expense. And sometimes the newer drugs are like, they are magical, but they cost more because they're now newer. And a lot of persons who are not on insurance, or even after a while the insurance can't cope with it. Every month you're supposed to get $30,000 or $20,000 for medication. So they have to assist them maybe in things like that, or making sure that they're registered with NHF, that they can actually get the support, financial as well. And the social support.
Yes.
Being able to assist them in going to do different things, to be involved in the community and involved in other things that can lift the spirit.
There's so much to talk about,
Yes.
Dr. Daly. Thanks so much for speaking with me today. It has been such a pleasure. We have so much work to do, because we didn't even touch the fact that to distinguish intellectual, in that whole set of mental disabilities. But I know that we will talk again some more on this topic. So thank you. Looking forward to seeing you again at some other time. This has been the PBCJ's A Different Life. I'm Dr. Christine Hendricks. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.